You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Folks, this is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my program, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. And you can go over to Odyssey 1, ODYSY1.com to see all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio. Also, come on over to my YouTube channel, that's Mr. Scotty Roberts, and check out the live chat room and also all the archives of almost nearly the past 200 shows we've done on Odyssey Radio. There's also, because somebody asked, a whole lot of other stuff there from before I was on Odyssey Radio. A lot of commentary, a lot of book reading, a lot of other stuff like that. Videos on travels, even my family stuff is over there. So go on over, take a look at my YouTube page, subscribe, and hit the little bell for notifications. So thanks for being here tonight, folks. Go over and by the way, join that chat room with the other Intrepids on my YouTube channel. And tonight I'm going to take a little tributary off, not even a tributary, it's a deviation off of what we've been talking about, only because there are other issues going on other than speaking about masculinity and true masculinity, honest masculinity, what it really is, and other issues surrounding that. Yesterday, with the news of coming out of Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota, just a half an hour from here, was the news, of course, as we all know by now, of the police officers who killed the man that they were detaining. They handcuffed him for about 3.5 minutes, put his knee to the back of the man's neck, and of course the man ended up dying as a result of this. And major questions have come out of that. I've got some good friends of mine who I respect and I love dearly that are not American that have asked questions of me. Something's got to change in America, I was told. And I said, well, what do you suggest needs to be changed? And that was not to challenge this friend of mine on any other level other than, what are you thinking? What is it that you think we need to change? And what was brought up as a result of the cop killing somebody was questions of the Vietnam War and things like that. I said, now that's really getting far adrift from the current topic. So what do you think would be the things that need changing? And we kind of left off on the conversation at that point, or at least I haven't checked back on it. And I started thinking for myself, what are the things about America? Why do we love America? Why does there seem to be at least a handful of people that I encounter in other countries, people who think America is a problem and America needs to change? And I started looking into that a little bit and digging and researching and not finding a lot of information out there. And frankly, I don't think most people outside of the United States think that much about the United States, meaning give it much brain power. They don't spend a lot of time thinking, it's like I don't spend a lot of time thinking about how Norway needs to change. It's just not on my plate. But because we are a superpower, because we fund a lot of the world, now that's even a misnomer. I'm going to get into arguments with people over that one, because China funds most of the world. The Bank of Britain, Bank of England, funds a lot of the world. The United States, as a taxpayer in the United States, I would look at all the places our money goes to for aid and financial support and say, wow, the United States sure seems to fund things a lot. Does that mean we are a rich country, or does it mean we are a poor country with lots of money? That's the big question, I think, that gets thrown out there. what is the cultural state of the United States? And in looking at this issue, the first thing I need to say is that I am an American. I am a citizen of the United States of America. I love my country. I will defend my country. I will defend the freedoms that I have. I will say in a blanket statement, if so many people hate America, why do so many people want to come here? It's a rhetorical question, but it's a question I would ask. A lot of people want to be here because of what we offer the individual, because of the freedoms that we have. It started as a great experiment 250 plus years ago, and it still is a great experiment. It's a republic. It's a constitutionally limited republic. One of the questions that came up today in this conversation was, aren't 50 states too much for the United States to control? Well, yeah, and I don't think it was ever meant to be controlled by the United States as a federal structure. It was a confederation, if you will, a federation, a unifying of 50 independent states under a singular constitution, which unified us. And that, of course, is spread to 50 states and colonies and or territories and things like that. And so the United States exists as a unification of 50 free states. Now, we all have to fall under the Constitution. That is a pledge that we took. That is part of the nation that we founded. And I love my country, and I will stand for my country. That doesn't mean I agree with everything that happens within my country. Now, it's not really the country itself that I see as a problem, or that people around the world view as a problem. It's more a cultural issue that I think is the problem of the United States. And so I want to talk about a few things that are things that most Americans don't even know that they don't know about America. And I think these are important. They could come across as very negative about America, but I think if someone were to ask me, what are the changes that you need to make in America, perhaps these are things that represent that. And so I'm going to go through some of these things and then talk about them a bit. And you can chat about them over in the chat room. And, of course, if you have opinions on this stuff, wide open to take your opinions on this, either over in the live chat room or you can write me over at scottallenroberts@gmail.com. And so what are the things that most Americans don't know that they don't know about America, despite living in one of the wealthiest and most advanced societies in history? Americans know very little about themselves and the rest of the world. So kind of look at it this way. This is an illustration that I saw that was put up in front of me. Imagine you have a brother and he's an alcoholic. He has his moments, but you keep your distance from him. You don't mind him for the occasional family gathering or holiday, and you still love him, but you don't want to be around him all the time. And this is how I would lovingly describe the way maybe sometimes I and others describe our current relationship with our own country that we love, the United States. The United States is like my alcoholic brother, in the sense that I'll always love the United States, but there are times that I don't like what's going on in the United States, and I'd rather distance myself from things that are going on in the United States. Now, by distance myself, I don't mean that I don't get involved. I look at the cop killing yesterday. Well, the cop that killed the man they were detaining. Definitely out of line, definitely out of order, definitely, if at the very least, was manslaughter. A cop killing a man that didn't need to die, as far as we know. So, I know it sounds a little harsh, but the United States isn't in a great place nowadays. Now, let me modify that statement by saying we are a great country. We are a place that that is open to those who want to come here for freedom. We have immigration laws, of course, which prevent people from coming in just willy-nilly. We're no longer in a place that we were in 100 years ago or 200 years ago, where we could fling open the gates and you could go just about anywhere and do just about anything. We're populated, perhaps some would say overpopulated, and we are dealing with our own problems, our own internal societal and cultural wars. So there has to be limits on immigration. So let me get that out of the way first of all. But I think the problem with the United States is not a socioeconomic one, although that's got its problems and things we have to deal with now. But it's rather a cultural one. The problem with the United States is a cultural problem, and that does affect our socioeconomics. And we'll talk, maybe if we have time, we'll talk about that a little bit. I realize it's going to be impossible to say things like this without there being a whole host of variables and opinions coming from all different sides of the issue. I'm going to have my fellow conservative Americans that seem to love our country say, how can you say those things about the United States? Well, I'm not condemning the United States. I'm talking about our problems. We do have problems, and we do have things that we need to shore up. Rocky and I constantly talk about, even though we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and we have all these glorious things about the founding and the continuation of the United States, it's still a place where it seems like we work 10 times longer than we used to have to work to still make a whole lot less and always be behind the ball. There's some problem socio and economically going on in the United States that causes us to be the richest nation. Well, let me rephrase that: the poorest nation with the most money. And I think that's a cultural problem. And so some people might think I'm coming across as a prick or a dick or an idiot. Those are going to come out. But hear me out. Open up to dialogue. Open up to conversation. Open up to discussion on these things. You know, when you move out of your parents' house and you live on your own, how you start hanging out with your friends' families and you realize that actually your family was a little screwed up, maybe a little dysfunctional. That's your first realization. And as it turns out, stuff you always assumed was normal your entire childhood was actually pretty weird. And might have actually screwed you up a little bit for life. And you know, Dad thinking it was funny to wear a Santa Claus hat in his underwear every Christmas, or the fact that you and your sister slept in the same bed until you were 22. There's actually porn sites for that now, believe it or not. Or that your mother routinely cried over a bottle of wine while listening to, I don't know, the Beatles or Elton John, reminiscing about the old days. And so the point is, we don't really get perspectives on what's the closest to us until we spend time away from those things. And just like you didn't realize the kind of quirks and nuances your family had until you left and spent time with other people, the same is true for country and culture. And you don't often see what's messed up about your country and culture until you step outside the box and look back in. Some of us have spent time away. Now, I never lived abroad, but not in that sense for years or two, or went to school out of the country. But I've traveled places in the world. I've been to, say, Egypt. I've been several times for several months. But when you step outside the box and you look back in, you can see how things are screwed up. You can also see how good things are. You know, when we have a screwed up family and we go off on our own and we see other people and other people's families and see how screwed up our family was, we are also always drawn back home because that is where the love was. For most of us, many of us. That is where the heart is. I'd rather take the screwed up things about my family and love my family and be around them than to disown them, because they're not like what my friend's family was like, or things like that. Everybody's got their problems, and as maybe somebody's even typing into the chat room now, not only do we have our problems, we're all screwed up. We all have dysfunctions we come from. That is part of human existence. And I would say things like a cop, a bad cop, who would mistreat somebody that he is supposed to be defending while he's arresting him, protecting and serving the community, and for whatever reason he was arresting this guy, he needs to protect his rights at the same time, ends up killing him, is not representative of the entirety of the almost 700,000 active police officers in the United States. That's a 0.000, I think, 5%. I looked up the percentage point. I did the math on it a while back, and that's a very small percentage of the cops that are out there. And the reason we hear a lot of this stuff, for those of you who ask, America needs to change this stuff. Well, you're seeing sensationalized stories. And somebody asked me yesterday, well, what do you mean by sensationalized? Do you not agree that there is systemic racism in our culture? And I said, no, I don't agree with that. I don't believe there's systemic racism. I believe racism is a thing of the human heart. It starts with individuals and it ends with individuals. We do not have a system in the United States that thrives on racism. Does that mean there are not people who are racist that inhabit every little aspect of society? No, it doesn't mean that at all. Because United States citizens are like citizens of any other country. Except here we experience great freedom, and so therefore we have great responsibility. But at the same time, you still have individuals. The problem of racism, the problems of murder, the problems of bad cops versus good cops, these all involve the individual human heart. And government cannot legislate the heart. It can legislate basic rules, basic laws that we have to operate by, and when people violate those in this country, then we do something about that. So, while we might have ideas that our families of origin were a little screwed up, we can compare that to our country, perhaps our country of origin, the United States. If you were born here, if you're a citizen here, this is your country. Just like people who say, the current president is not my president. Well, yeah, fuck off. He is your president. And so, sorry to put it that way. Sorry for the language. Odyssey Radio. Hopefully somebody will catch that and bleep it out. But I got to tell you something. We, in this country, love our country. We should fight and defend our president, while even we might disagree with that president. I did it with Obama for 8 years. Didn't agree with much about him. But I said that I would fight to defend my president to somebody else. It's like my brother and I, when we were growing up, we fought all the time. Fight, 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 fight. I insist that I am alive today because the screen door opened out as he was chasing me to beat the shit out of me in the neighbor's front yard. But if somebody tried to threaten me, guess who was the first person who stood up for me? My brother. And he defended me and protected me because I was his little brother. Not so little anymore, but you get the idea. And so some of the things I'm going to say here today might seem a little scathing, but I want you all to know that some of the stuff we do and some of the stuff we've always assumed was normal in this country, it's kind of screwed up. And that's okay, because the truth with every culture is the same. It's just easier to spot in others. Like, I can look at the French and go, the French. So we don't always notice it in ourselves. The French could look at us and go, mon Dieu. Huh? And so, as you listen to some of the things I have to say about this, believe it or not, I'm still only on the introduction of what I'm going to say today. Everything you got to look at with kind of a tough love. The same tough love with which I'd sit down and lecture an alcoholic family member. It doesn't mean I don't love you. I don't love my country. It doesn't mean that at all. It means because I love my country, I look at these things and I say, these are areas we need to fix. These are problem areas, maybe blind spots for us all. Doesn't mean I'm some kind of saint either. It doesn't mean that there aren't some awesome things about my country that are exceptional on the world scale, the world stage. There are just a few things that we all need to hear. And as a United States citizen, I'm going to say to my fellow citizens, and those of you who aren't citizens of this country, what you ask questions about when they occur to you, we're going to talk about that. And so, I have a pretty good perspective on America. I'm an American citizen. I'm a Native American. I'm not Native American by race. I am Native American by heritage, by ancestry, by culture. And this is, I'm going to talk about some things that are kind of generalized. But I want you to think about these things and consider them. Now let's get into this. I've got a list here of things that I think are things we all need to understand. These are the things about America that Americans don't know that we don't know. 1, there are few people outside of America who are impressed by us. Now, what I mean by that is, unless you're speaking with a real estate agent or a prostitute, chances are they're not going to be excited that you're an American once you step across our borders and go out there. It's not some badge of honor that we get to parade around. Yeah, we had Steve Jobs, who founded Apple. We had Thomas Edison, who kind of was the first to mass market the light bulb, but stole the idea from Tesla, frankly. But unless you actually are Steve Jobs or Edison or some of these people, these masters of invention, which is unlikely, then most people around the world are simply not going to care about who you are. There are exceptions, of course, and those exceptions are called English and Australian people. Who cares? As Americans, we're brought up our entire lives being taught that we're the best. We are exceptional. We did everything first and the rest of the world follows our lead. Now, not only is this not true, but people get a little irritated when you bring it to their country with you. So don't. The United States is exceptional because of the form of government we have, because of the opportunity we've created for people, opportunity that doesn't exist outside these borders in many countries around the world. But when you travel outside the world, don't wear it on your sleeve like, hey, I'm American, kiss my feet. That's not the way it should be. Because most people don't really care. They're not really impressed by the U.S. In general. I'm speaking in general. Now, if somebody's seeking freedom, somebody looking for their liberties, somebody looking to escape an evil regime, they do look to the United States. Why? Because we offer that to people. If you do it the right way, don't come sneaking across our borders, then instantly you make yourself a criminal. You've broken the law before you're even here. And you'll probably get sent packing. Detained at the border for a while. So, the other thing to go along with that first one, few people are impressed by us, is number 2, few people really hate us. There's not a lot of people that hate the United States out there. And I'm going to get into why when we come back from the break. So you guys sit tight. We got to be out for 2 minutes, and we'll be right back. right, gang, thanks for waiting through the break. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid Radio Program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Go over and see all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio. At the same time, you can come on over to my YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, where we have a live chat room, and that's my video simulcast at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Join the other Intrepids in the live chat and have a good time while listening to the show tonight, and perhaps watching the video, which isn't overly exciting because all you're really doing is looking at my mug for about an hour as I talk. You can look at pretty things in my background, and that's about it. So come on over, join the live chat, and and you can find all the archives, by the way, for every show I've done on Odyssey Radio over on my YouTube chat. My YouTube channel. I keep saying chat for channel. Channel, where there is also a chat. Now, we left off. We're talking about America. We're talking about the things, and this was prompted by a dear, sweet friend of mine in Australia who asked, isn't it time for things to change in America? And I asked, what do you believe needs changing? And, of course, this was all prompted by all the stories, the sensationalized stories of another cop killing another black guy in America. And a story that happened not far from here, our local city, if you could say, a half an hour away, and in Minneapolis. And so I contend that those types of incidents are not systemic. They are not indicative of a huge problem in America. They are indicative of people who commit heinous acts. This was an individual cop who did individually something wrong and will individually have to pay the price for this because he individually took another individual's life. This was not sanctioned by the police department. It is not actions that are sanctioned by the police department. It is not the way they are trained to act. And this guy, he's already been fired. All 4 of the cops that were there have been fired. Now there's going to be investigations. I'm sure there's going to be a trial. This guy will more than likely, if at the least, will suffer charges of manslaughter. At the worst, it's going to be murder. This is an individual problem that is sensationalized by the news only because he is a cop. And if you took all of the cop stories of killing black people or the white people that don't get advertised in the news because it's not sensational and it doesn't stir up the race problem, which is something that's sensational with the news media, there are all kinds of people get killed by cops. There are all kinds of cops that get killed by people. And it's all various colors. It's across the scale. The black community can take their issue and protest it and believe that it is solely them that are singled out. It's not. But this is a problem of individual morality. But this is what brought up the question with my foreign friends. As America's out of control. Well, it's not. There are individuals who are out of control. And I'll repeat it again, that something I said in the first segment, for this cop and even the handful of cops over the recent years that have been in situations like this that have been sensationalized by the news, some acquitted, some found guilty, some questionable, some not so questionable, that this represents a small handful of the almost 700,000 active police officers in the United States. You gather up all the stories of atrocities committed by police, and you'll find it's still a small handful. And if you came up with 100 stories, I'd be surprised. And I'm padding that figure. What's 100 out of 700,000? That's quite a small number. So if you take just the handful, you take this one incident from over the weekend, you're talking about a 0.0005% of all cops in the United States. So that's where the questions came from. So we started looking at this. What are the things that Americans don't know that they don't know? And the first one is how few people around the world are really overly impressed by us. And that's not a diminutive statement. It's not a negative statement. It's just one that says they don't think about us as much as we think they think about us. Number 2, and we left off with just introducing this one, is that people hate us. That's a misconception. That the world hates us. Despite the occasional eye-rolling and the complete inability to understand why people would vote for George Bush or Barack Obama twice, people from other countries don't really hate us either. In fact, and I know this is going to be a sobering realization for us, most people in the world don't really think or care about us all that much in their day-to-day lives. I mean, it's like I asked in the first segment, how often do you wander through your workaday life and all the things you have to do and go, gosh, I wonder how things are going in Bolivia today? People just don't care. Meaning it's not a going concern. And I know that sounds absurd, especially with CNN and Fox News showing the same 20 angry Arab men on repeat for 10 years straight. But unless you're invading someone's country or threatening to invade someone's country, then there's a 99.99% chance they don't care about us. Just like we rarely think about other people. I mentioned Bolivia already. Mongolia. How many of you spend much mental effort thinking about the lifestyle in Mongolia or the government of Mongolia? Most people don't think about it. They have jobs. All around the world, people have jobs. Whether it's in a first world setting or a third world setting, they have jobs. They have kids. They have house payments. Those things called lives. They have those things to worry about. Kind of like us here in America. Americans tend to assume that the rest of the world loves us or hates us. And this is actually a good litmus test to tell if someone's conservative or liberal. The fact is, most people feel neither. Most people don't think much about us at all. Remember that immature girl in high school? How every little thing that happened to her meant that someone either hated her or was obsessed with her, who thought every teacher who ever gave her a bad grade was totally unfair, and everything good that happened to her was because of how amazing she was? Yeah. We're that immature high school girl when we think that about ourselves and the world. Now, the world does consider the United States. It looks to the United States. It looks to China. It looks to Russia. It looks at the superpowers and wonders, what's going to go on and how's it going to affect the rest of us. But I don't think people on the other side of the world, in third world, second world, even first world countries, think much about us on a daily basis. They're concerned about their own shit. They're concerned about getting their lawns mowed. They're concerned about paying the cable bill. They're concerned about playing tennis or going boating or hunting or doing the things that they do. So that's what I mean by that. That people don't really care that much or think that much about us. So the world doesn't hate us either, folks. There's actually a lot of love for America out there, but there's a lot of hate for America out there. But in general, it's not a going concern. Third thing, we know nothing about the rest of the world as Americans. For all of our talk about being global leaders and how everyone follows us, we don't seem to know much about our supposed followers out there in the world. They often have completely different takes on history than we do. And here's some brain stumpers for me. The Vietnamese were more concerned with independence, not us, during the Vietnam War. Hitler was primarily defeated by the Soviet Union, not us. There's evidence that the Native Americans were wiped out largely by disease and plague before Europeans arrived, and not just afterward. And the American Revolution was partly won because the British invested more of their resources in fighting France and not us. Notice a running theme here? Hint, it's not all about us. The world is more complicated. It's a more complicated place. Now, of all those things I stated, I think the one about Native Americans and disease, that's going to pop out for people. The United States, in its expansion westward, did commit atrocities against the Native Americans. Hitler did lose the war primarily not just because of the Soviet Union, but because of the United States. Because we were there. Those things exist. But for the most part, there are complications, there are other matters, there are all kinds of wrinkles in the fabric. And so that running theme is that the world is more complicated. We didn't invent democracy in the United States. We didn't even invent modern democracy. And by the way, because it's worth repeating again, the United States is not a democracy. Most of us know that already. It's been repeated ad infinitum over the last decade especially. The United States is not a democracy. We have democracy. The United States is a constitutionally limited republic. A constitutionally limited representative republic. We vote for representatives who vote in legislation. Things like that. So we all know that those are the basics. If you don't know that about America, you don't know much about even your own country. If the next time you call America a democracy, you're wrong. America has democracy. We are not a democracy. Look it up. There is a huge difference. So if you call the United States a democracy, then you don't even know that much about your own country. So, again, let's on this point, we don't know that much about the rest of the world is pretty true. We didn't invent democracy. We didn't invent modern democracy. There are parliamentary systems in England and other parts of Europe over 100 years before we created a government in the United States. And in a recent survey of young Americans, 63% could not find Iraq on a map. Do you know where Iraq is? I could tell you because I've looked at it a million times. I could spin a globe and point my finger at it. Bing! Just like that. Do you know where Iraq is? Do you know where Iran is? Do you know where Pakistan is? These are big questions. On a map, 63% couldn't find Iraq, despite being at war with them just a decade ago. In a recent survey of young Americans, 54% did not know Sudan was a country in Africa. Yet somehow we're positive that everyone else looks up to us. They look up to us, but we don't have to know who they are. And so let's move on. Number 4, we are poor at expressing gratitude and affection in the United States. There's a saying about English speakers. We say, go fuck yourself, when we really mean, I like you. And we say, I like you, when we really mean, go fuck yourself. And so outside of getting shithouse drunk and screaming, I love you, man, I love you, bro, whoever, open displays of affectionate American culture are tepid and rare. That's why the little hug me, free hugs movement and all of that. Before, of course, we had to stay 6 feet away from each other, which I think we're finding out slow but sure didn't need to happen in the first place. But Latin and some European cultures describe us as cold and passionless in the United States. And for good reason. In our social lives, we don't say what we mean, and we don't mean what we say. Do you know when I was in Egypt, one of the standard greetings between men is a kiss on each cheek? Touch the shoulders, kiss on the cheek. And it's not meant to be weird or different. It's different than our culture. In our culture, appreciation and affection are implied rather than spoken outright. There's 2 guy friends call each other names to reinforce their friendship. Look at Rocky and me, the way we talk about each other. It's to reinforce our friendship. But I believe there's also a deep affection that we have for each other that shows in the way we talk about each other. We sometimes blow sunshine up each other's ass to show how much we care and respect the other person. You've seen us do it. Men and women tease and make fun of each other to imply interest. Feelings are almost never shared openly and freely. Consumer culture has cheapened our language of gratitude. Something like, it's so good to see you, is empty now because it's expected and it's heard from everybody. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? I'll use that one quite a bit. We've got greetings. How you doing? Hey, I'm fine. How you doing? Oh, I'm good. And onward we move in our conversations or whatever we're doing, when neither of those things might even be true. So it's empty and it's expected to be heard. In dating, when I would find a woman attractive, I almost always walked right up to her to tell her that A, I wanted to meet her, B, she's beautiful, C, do you want to go to bed? I'm being lighthearted on the last one. I think that's something that's missing in our culture, too, is that we just aren't straightforward and honest. Now, maybe some people would say, well, that's pretty low to think that way. Well, that's being honest with people. Hey, I like you. I find you attractive. That's the first things I said to Rainey. I like you. I find you very attractive. I wasn't drawn to Rainey's personality. You know why? Because I didn't see her personality until I got to know her. You know why I was drawn to Rainey? Because she was gorgeous. So I was drawn to Rainey. And that's the way it works. Now, sometimes we see people from afar and go, oh, he's got a wonderful personality. I'd really like to meet him or her. And so sometimes it works that way, but be direct, be straightforward. In America, women usually get incredibly nervous and confused when somebody walks up to them. A guy comes up and says, hey, I find you very attractive. I'd like to know you. They'll make jokes to diffuse the situation, or sometimes asking me if I'm part of a TV show or something, playing a prank of some kind or something. And even when they're interested and go on dates, they would get a bit disoriented when I'm so blunt with my interest. Whereas in almost every other culture, approaching women this way is met with a confident smile and a thank you. So unless you're a Muslim culture, that one's a little tougher. It's not a slam on Muslims, it's just they act a little differently. So we're poor at expressing gratitude and affection in this country. The fifth one, and I can see we are not going to make it through this material today, the stuff I have up here, but the quality of life for the average American isn't that great. Now, maybe comparatively it is to other places in the world, but it's not superb. Supposedly Pablo Escobar once said, I'm not a rich man, I'm a poor man with a lot of money. The United States isn't a rich country, it's a poor country with a lot of money. If you're extremely talented or extremely intelligent, the U.S. is probably the best place in the world to live. The system is stacked heavily to allow people of talent and people of advantage to rise to the top quickly. And by advantage, I mean advantage mentally, intellectually. I'm not talking about privilege. That's out the window. That's not at all what I'm talking about. You create your own privilege. You're not born with it. Unless you're born, multimillionaire. Then you got some privilege, I guess. Self-imposed privilege. The problem with the U.S. is that everyone thinks they're of talent and advantage. And as John Steinbeck famously said, the problem with poor Americans is that they don't believe they're poor, but rather temporarily embarrassed millionaires. It's this culture of self-delusion that allows America to continue to innovate and churn out new industry more than anyone else in the world. But this shared delusion also unfortunately keeps perpetuating large social inequalities and the quality of life for the average citizen lower than most other developed countries. It's the price we pay to maintain our growth and our economic dominance. Most people out there don't make a lot of money. Most people out there live for backyard cookouts and, going to the lake in the summer. And don't have a lot of money to travel the world or take their family down a $6,000 vacation to Disney World. Imagine what it would cost to take a family of 5, my family, to Disney World and stay, let's say you stay on site for 5 days. You eat there, you party there, you see all the attractions there, stay in the hotel there, you buy souvenirs there. Guess what your tab is going to be by the end of that week? So to me, Being wealthy is having the freedom to maximize one's own life experiences. Now, yes, I would love to be wealthy in the sense that, and don't we all want that? We criticize it, stuff like that. I'd love to be wealthy. I'd love to be independently wealthy. It'd be nice to not have to worry about how to pay my bills or how to do things or how to accomplish things in life that take us years to figure out. How to pay for things or years of paying off credit card bills to get a new sofa. Things like that. So in those terms, despite the average American having more material wealth than citizens of most other countries, more cars. How many cars do you have in your family? Just one? You got two? Well, look at the rest of the world. Not a lot of families have 2 cars. Bigger houses. Look at the average house in America compared to the average house in other places in the world. We have nicer televisions than many people have houses. Their overall quality of life suffers, in my opinion, in America. We have more stuff and more goods and more money rolling in despite being poorer and not realizing it. Average people in America work more hours with less vacation time, more commuting time every day, and are saddled with over at least $10,000 worth of debt. That's not including your mortgage. And that's a lot of time spent working and buying crap and little time or disposable income for relationships, for activities, for new experiences. I look at things like this. I see people out there that are in need, and I wish I had the money to help people out more than I do. A couple bucks here and there doesn't go far in America, as you know. But I found that when I am saddled with debt, which thank goodness I don't have a lot of these days, but saddled with debt, look at the average American family, the average American. If you have a mortgage, if you have a car payment, if you have a credit card with at least $5,000 of credit on it, and you've used that credit, and you're paying that off, if you have school debt, school loans, look at the average American who also pays, when you think of income tax on your paychecks, plus the tax you pay on goods and services, the taxes that are the hidden taxes. Do you realize you're on the internet right now? How much of that internet bill is a percentage of tax? So everything we have is taxed. They say the average American pays about 60% of their income in tax of one form or another. So you look at all those things together, that's a lot of life of enslavement to your own bills. Enslavement to things where you aren't free to help others as much. Where you aren't free to do the things you want. You can't just pack up and walk away and go somewhere else and do things and travel, and because we're bound by debt. So the idea that America, our quality of life, is good is maybe overall, that's an honest statement. We've got good quality of life here. But the average American's quality of life isn't that good when you get down to the socioeconomics of it, the culture we live in, the keeping up with the Joneses type mentality. Now, many of us say, psh, I don't do that. But how many of us will see the neighbor as, oh, they got that new big van thing for all their kids. I think we need to get one of those. We might not think of it as envious or covetous or anything like that, using high and mighty language. We just might go, hey, that's a great idea. I need to get one of those. Or how many people, they improved their yards, or Jim down the street got his riding John Deere mower for his big lawn. Oh, man, I'm so tired of doing the push mower. I think I'm going to get a John Deere riding mower. That's what we do in America, and we go out in debt, and we don't realize how much we enslave ourselves to things. Now, I've never been a person that stands out. I'm not an advocate for that. I'm just saying many of us don't realize what we don't have and what we do have. and that the average American quality of life isn't that good because of it. So 6, the rest of the world isn't a slum-ridden shithole compared to us. There's a lot. I had a friend who, in 2010, he got a taxi in Bangkok to take him to a new 6-story Cineplex. And it was accessible by the metro, but he chose the taxi instead. And on the seat in front of him was a sign with a Wi-Fi password. Wait, what? I asked the driver, he had a Wi-Fi, my friend said, in the taxi cab. And he flashed a huge smile. The squat Thai man with his pidgin English explained that he'd installed it himself. And then he turned on his new sound system with disco lights. His taxi instantly became a cheesy nightclub on wheels with free Wi-Fi. My friend was very impressed by this. So if there's one constant when I travel outside the country, over the past decade mostly, well, I did a lot of travel before I had little kids again, but it's been that almost every place I've visited is nice and it's safe. Every time I went to Egypt, somebody would say to me, "Oh my God, be careful over there." And I'm like, Egypt was a place where I felt more safe walking the streets of downtown Luxor than I did walking the streets of downtown Chicago. It's a safe place, and people there were nice. They were happy to see us. "How are you doing? Welcome to Egypt." And, we'd sit and talk, and we'd have... It's like I put up that quote the other day that, Hemingway said, if you want to know about a culture, don't go to its city squares, don't go to its office buildings, don't go to its governmental centers. Go to the local bars and meet the people. And that's very true. And so, every place I've traveled seems to be nice. It seems to be open. I have never ran into anybody hating me because I was American. And I know that there are places around the world that are very built up and amazing places to visit that are sometimes better than what we have in America. We have this naive assumption that people all over the world are struggling and way behind us, but they're not. There are other countries that have advanced high-speed internet networks. They have multi is not the word. They have traveling, commuting systems that are up. Now, maybe you could look at it more socioeconomically and say, you break that down, it's costing them a lot of money. Meanwhile, the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Now, that's not apples to apples. It's apples to oranges, but that's the truth out there. What's so surprising about the world is how unsurprising most of it is. And so every country thinks they have the worst drivers. Every country thinks their weather is unpredictable. The world becomes unpredictable. So, everyone hates getting stuck in traffic. Sit with anybody in a foreign country, they talk about their families, they talk about their school debt, they talk about getting stuck in traffic. So there it is. There's a few more. We're paranoid, we're status obsessed, and we seek attention. We're less healthy than we think we are. And we mistake comfort for happiness. Maybe we'll hit those tomorrow, before we get back into talking about masculinity and things like that, of a psychological nature. But we're out of time today. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Consider the things you don't know about America.